Welcome to The Gender Rebels, a question and answer podcast that explores life outside the gender binary.
I'm Kath, a cis woman and ally.
And I'm Faith, a trans woman.
Special thank you to all our Patreon supporters. Hey everyone, I'm Kath.
And I'm Faith.
Faith, do we have any patrons to thank?
We do.
Let's hear them.
Zoe N.
Zoe N lives in a den.
Olivia C.
Olivia C. Come bowling with me.
Jennifer H.
Jennifer H. has a name that begins with H.
Philip S.
Philip S. just made a mess.
Emily S.
Emily S. works the letterpress.
There you go.
Hey, Faith.
Yes, what's up?
What did we do tonight?
We watched the 17th episode of Season 5 of Star Trek The Next Generation.
Is that TNG?
TNG, as they call it.
I dropped some Star Trek lingo.
There we go.
For the first and last time in my entire life.
That you know of.
Ooh.
So this is The Outcast. And this is the first episode in Star Trek history to deal with homosexuality. And it is a...
what year did it come out?
1992.
92. Take me back. Clinton administration?
Clinton won the election.
Okay.
So this was actually during Bush's first...
Oh, the tail end of Bush.
First Bush.
Bush
yes.
won. Mm-hmm.
And this was, during the time of... Clinton was about to become president, and everyone was still kind of a little conservative in America.
Mm-hmm. Well, we had all that Reagan-Bush.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I are Carter babies, technically, but we did grow up in Reagan and Bush.
We did, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And so it is... Star Trek is a show that really... when I say a show, I mean a series of shows and movies that really tried... A franchise, if you will. That really tried to be progressive. And it's very interesting to look at it and look back. When you look at something that's really trying to be super progressive, it's interesting to look back on those time frames and realize how kind of not progressive it feels.
In fairness, it couldn't have been perfect, but it's really interesting to see what writers in 91 or 92 thought the future would be and thought would be significantly different. I mean, they still had a white guy driving the ship.
Yeah, actually,
an old white guy driving the ship.
Yeah, and it would literally be Deep Space Nine, I think, in '96 before they had a black captain, a non-white male captain, and of course Captain Janeway. That was Benjamin Sisko from Deep Space Nine, and then Captain Janeway from Voyager was the first female captain, and then with Enterprise they were like, let's go back to a white guy.
But it was always a diverse cast.
It's always a diverse cast.
Even Martin Luther King Jr. had some input on the first...
With Nichelle Nichols.
That's it. And she wanted to quit, and he said it's important that kids see a military commander in space who was also a black woman.
And she was generally considered one of the first black female characters on TV who wasn't a maid.
Fuck.
And this was the 60s.
Fuck.
So,
still.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Whoopi Goldberg was on the show. There's always been...
Old school Star Trek, first interracial kiss.
Asians,
they had
blacks.
Chekhov, Russian on the bridge.
Ooh.
So, it's weird that it's progressive in its own way. But on the other hand, looking back at an episode like 1992's The Outcast, it doesn't feel very progressive.
I feel like we can call it clumsily progressive.
Clumsily progressive,
which, in fairness, if you and I wrote a show about a airport or hospital or cruise ship or whatever 30 years from now, we'd get some stuff kind of right.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff super wrong. And either way, it would feel kind of awkward.
Yeah. So The Outcast is basically, there is this planet of people called the Janai. And the Enterprise shows up to help them with the mysterious disappearance of their shuttlecraft. And the Janai are actually a species that does not have gender, is how we're introduced to them. In fact, the captain's log describes them as an androgynous race.
Okay.
And basically the U.S. Riker, Commander Riker, the second in command of the Enterprise, basically teams up with one of the Janai scientists.
The pilots.
The pilot, yeah.
They're a pilot, yeah.
To, explore what's going on with this and see if they can figure out a way to rescue the crew of this missing shuttlecraft. They discover it's like essentially in a hole in space. Mm-hmm. And, spoiler alert for a 30-year-old episode. And
kind of like a black hole. Like it's absorbing all of the information or something.
But not a black hole. It's
right.
just a sort of empty area in space.
It's a
null space.
It's a, what's the word I'm looking for? Lacuna.
Yeah, there you go. A hole. Mm-hmm. So,
a sciencey word meaning hole.
Or Commander Riker and this Janai pilot, Soren, get a little flirty while they're doing their shuttle research and things like that. And slowly, of course, they develop an attraction.
What do you mean, of course?
Because it's Riker, and Riker was the playboy. Riker's always hooking up with people.
So Riker's the sexy one. Is that?
I guess. I think they were trying to make him like the Kirk. Kirk was always like banging female aliens and stuff.
Why didn't they make Picard the sexy one?
I guess because he's old and bald.
But bald doesn't
matter
matter
more cerebral.
Anymore.
He was more cerebral. Riker was supposed to be a little more Kirk-like.
Okay, so he's the Sam Malone.
Kind of, yeah.
Of
the Enterprise.
The Enterprise.
Mm-hmm. So basically, they end up being a little flirty. Soren and Riker ended up being a little flirty. Mm-hmm. And the alien race, their supervisors, are like, what's going on with these two? Mm-hmm. They're being all flirty.
And we don't have that on our planet and in our
because
culture.
It's a crime to express any gendered behavior. And so eventually what happens is they have a lot of it's Star Trek. It's cerebral. So there's less blowing shit up in lightsaber fights and a little more like discussions of the nature of what it means to be human. Clumsy though they may be at times. But then eventually it's illegal to express gender on this planet, and Soren ends up getting caught making out with Riker, and gets electrocuted. There's a trial.
Psychotechnics.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
So basically, Riker shows up at their trial and is like, hey, this is bullshit. And actually tries to break them out and stuff like that. And then, but when Riker goes to break Soren out, Soren's like, why would you want to break me out? I've been cured. I'm all happy now with my non-gendered behavior. And that's basically the end of the episode.
All right.
The forces of bigotry prevail this time.
This was the first episode of TNG I've ever seen.
Really? But you're familiar kind of with the concept.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so Faith is the Star Trek girl, and I grew up really enjoying Star Trek: The Next Generation. I sort of tried to watch some of the other shows, and I've seen episodes of them here and there, but Star Trek: The Next Generation was the one I grew up on that I really enjoyed. And I have been rewatching it because, hey, I gotta dilate for 40 minutes a day, so let's watch an episode a day. I feel like it's kind of your comfort food.
A little bit.
A TV show. And I also remember a certain Christmas where I was in Chicago, my brother was in Chicago, and my brother-in-law, we were all in Chicago, and I was just texting you all day because I missed you and you were back here, and you were watching Star Trek, and I was like, hey, brother-in-law, Faith is watching Star Trek right now. And he's like, oh, which one? And I asked you, and you responded TNG.
Oh, okay.
Which meant something to my brother-in-law. Yeah. I was like, I think she's watching TNG? And he's like, which episode? So there's a whole Star Trek world out there that I'm not into at all.
TNG is basically... Some people use TOS to be the original series, or DS9 for Deep Space Nine, but that's actually takes as much time to say as Deep Space Nine.
It does, yeah.
No one's like STV for Star Trek Voyager, or STE for Star Trek Enterprise.
They just say
P
Voyager
for Picard.
Enterprise. Got it.
Yeah.
So it's this whole franchise that I've really never gotten into. When I was a kid and like flipping through channels and would find it, it just seemed sort of sterile and boring to me. So I never quite got into it. But Faith has been spending a lot of time with repeats, and you grew up watching it. I kind of get the appeal. I do. I think I get that it's a very, it's not like Star Wars or Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah,
it's a very safe, padded, carpeted, clean space, no matter where you are. Yeah. And you're talking about reversing the radio polarity. Frequency force and making sure that the Faraday cage is triple ionic because of the specific
because otherwise the subspace anomaly won't be rerouted through the main temporal dish. Precisely. And then you've got and then if we amplify the subneutron flux, then that might create a warp amplitude fluctuation that might reverse the polarity of the subflux. Yeah, it's technobabble is a Star Trek.
I just wonder how my brain would be different if I had grown up watching this. Probably not in a good way. Yeah. So I'm glad.
I remember one time I was with my dad and like our car broke down on the side of the road, and I was like, "Why can't you just go on the screen and just tap it away, bypass the power, and then you go, good to go."
Even in Star Wars, they were like, "Oh, I just rerouted and bypassed and blah blah," and I'm like,
"Yeah, Star Wars just sort of it works." Yeah. Star Trek is a little more techno-babbly. So this episode was designed kind of as a definite take on homosexuality.
It was a gay thing.
A ham-fisted metaphor for homosexuality, because this is what Star Trek is known for. Star Trek is known for, like, let's take a social issue, basically disguise it with some aliens with some forehead rubber. Because that's every alien in Star Trek just has like a different bumpy forehead.
Yes.
And so because that's I guess the easiest thing to do without interfering with people's mouths.
Because you still have to have eyes and mouth for dialogue.
So everyone's forehead gets bumpy in a different way. Mm-hmm. And then let's take this particular bumpy-headed alien this episode in their particular unitards, and let's have this metaphor. And so,
do they have metaphors for race and sex?
Yeah.
And
definitely.
Yeah,
definitely. Like, there's one of the most famous ones is like there's one where they go to the planet where there's like two sides locked in a Cold War, and they're the Yangs and the Coms.
Okay.
There's the famous episode of the original series where there's like black on the left side of their face and white on the right side,
and the other is reversed.
Yes, and they're killing each other, and one side is mistreating the other, and all this stuff. Again, not particularly subtle in their metaphors, but we give them credit. So again, it's that issue of you're trying to do this metaphor.
And like, so in this case, it was the gay episode.
This was the gay episode, which
a trans episode. It wasn't about the existence.
It was an accidental trans episode, in my opinion.
But it was the.
At the time, it was definitely the gay episode. But I was born this way.
My feelings aren't hurting anyone. Well, we're gonna fix you with psychotechnic treatment.
Yes.
Got it.
So to me, it's definitely an episode that also works for transgender.
Yeah,
hardcore.
It even works better for the existence of non-binary people.
Yeah, it does.
But, along the route from being a gay episode to an NB episode, it does also work for trans people. Mm-hmm. So talk to me about what your experience is watching
this. I remember the first time watching this episode. I would have been about 12 when I watched it.
So you would have seen it in 92?
Yeah. Wow. I remember watching this episode.
Hey, everyone. Faith was born in 1980.
And I remember my conservative dad being like, shoving their agenda down our throats,
They didn't really use the term snowflakes back then.
Yeah.
I guess it was just the agenda.
But
it was a gay episode.
No,
Even your dad knew it was
I definitely felt a little affinity with this episode.
Okay.
Again, not really. And there's something that the character Soren, the gender-expressing alien, in this, talks about. They're like, oh, I know that it was something different about me, and it took me a while to figure out.
But my whole life.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of thing, like, I watched this at the time. I didn't quite know I was different, but I definitely knew, I didn't know what being transgender was, and I definitely knew there was something, like, a little weird about me. Yeah, so this was one I definitely remember when it came on my, like, binge feed on Netflix, and I was like, oh my god, Kath's got to watch this. We're going to do an episode about this. And,
so it was oddly compelling to you, even as a 12-year-old.
Yes.
Even as your father scoffed at it.
Exactly.
You're like, there's something here.
There is. And again, it's ham-fisted. It's clumsy.
It's gonna be, right?
Yeah. And to me, it definitely... 30 years later, we've advanced way beyond what they think the 24th century was going to be like, which I have a bunch of notes I will get to. But what did you think of this episode?
So I have two things going on here. One is this really interesting approach to gender and a non-binary species, and also is my very first TNG episode. So all I know about TNG is, Picard. I know Riker never sits down normal. I saw that compilation of how he always sort of straddles a chair, and I think that had to do with some sort of back injury. Who's the psychologist? What's her name?
Deanna Troi,
ship's counselor, has sort of a deep V-neck uniform. So I've seen the meme online where everyone in the cast, including Worf, has a deep, elegant V-neck version of their uniform. Like from SNL and stuff, I'm sort of familiar with the bits of being on in the forecastle. What's it called? On the dock.
The bridge.
On the bridge. Yeah. Why is it called a bridge? What the fuck does it bridge over?
I actually, there is an episode of a YouTube channel I like to watch called Casual Navigation that is all about nautical history and science and things like that, and they did an episode about it, and I will link to that episode because I don't exactly remember.
All right, link down below.
Yeah.
So I'm new to the show, and these characters basically in any detail other than what memes have taught me. And, I didn't hate it. It was pretty straightforward. Like I said, it's very safe and clean and quiet and sanitary and padded and carpeted.
It's a flying hotel.
It is a flying hotel from 1973.
Yeah.
But clean.
Yeah.
It reminded me of waiting rooms from the early 80s, basically. That flat carpet that you can vacuum really easily. You could probably sweep it if you needed to, which we now have in our home. Yes. So seeing this show, I got the sciencey jargon, I got we're all scientists and pilots and, astronauts basically here, but yet human feelings take over. So Soren and the whole Janai race, they are genderless because they have short, sleek bowl cuts.
They all have the Mo haircut from the Three Stooges.
But it's like even sleeker than Mo. It's like closer to the scalp. Yeah. And they got the forehead, whatever. And they have velour bodysuits.
Definitely form hiding, velour bodysuits.
Form hiding, yeah. Yes. Not baggy exactly, but, you see straight lines of fabric and knee-high boots. And the velour bodysuits could be muted orange, muted green, or muted green. And they talked sort of stilted and whatever. And what I did notice is that there weren't, it was mostly female actors.
Yeah.
Talking a little bit lower than their normal cadence. You could tell, I think they were reaching down a little bit lower. I think in the very first scene there was a male actor, but he didn't talk at all.
There may have been.
Yeah.
This is from, I looked up on Memory Alpha, the Star Trek wiki, about this. So Rick Berman, the producer, tried not to let perceptions of what the public would find acceptable, quote, influence us too much in the choice of Riker's opposite, adding, quote, but having Riker engaged in passionate kisses with the male actor might have been a little unpalatable to viewers. Jonathan Frakes, the actor who played Riker, criticized the decision to cast women in the roles of the Janai and said, quote, I didn't think they were gutsy enough to take it where they should have.
Interesting.
Soren should have been more obviously male. We've gotten a lot of male in this episode, but I'm not sure it was as good as it could have been if they were trying to do what they call a gay episode, quote. So
he's not wrong.
Yeah.
Like a slender, sort of a little higher speaking than average, but really, I mean, in a perfect world, also, they'd have found a non-binary actor, but this was 1992.
The actress they got to play her was also like 5'0" and very slim and
but not like attractive, and I'm doing air quotes here, not like conventionally big eyes, bow mouth. They didn't throw a lot of makeup. The character was, for most of the episode, and what we were told, a genderless, or I'm going to say non-binary person.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I watched this episode. They talk about psychotechnic treatment.
I made that note. Psychotechnic therapy. I was going to say, Kath, you're the psychiatrist. Is that technobabble?
Yes. Yes, it is technobabble. And I feel like I'm not going out on a limb here. They want you to think about electroshock or conversion therapy. Yeah. They want you to think of something terrible because here's a character who thinks one way, but that's incorrect. And so we do quote unquote therapy, and then they're grateful. And the character Soren talked about a classmate who got in front of the class and said how grateful they were.
Oh, no. He. Because actually, that was one thing I noted. Soren consistently used the correct pronouns for this person.
For that person.
Throughout, yeah.
Yes. We'll go to pronouns in a second because it's important.
Janai, yes.
Yeah. So that Janai that Soren called he, and they identified as male, and then they went for psychotechnic, and then he got in front of the whole class, and he said how happy he was to be cured and to be free from this. And another interesting thing Soren said is it's seen as less evolved.
Yeah.
Did they use the word barbaric?
No, these primitive.
Primitive.
That's it. Yeah. Primitive to have gender.
So like and reproduction is different on their planet. People fertilize a husk. Apparently it's pleasurable, whatever. But we're just talking about presentation.
They jerk off into a basket.
You jerk off in a basket. Yeah.
That's what I got from that speech. They kept mentioning, they mentioned like a husk.
Jerk off in a basket. Yeah.
I pictured it as some sort of external thing, like fish.
Yeah.
I guess.
Honestly, it sounds immensely pleasurable to me.
Yes.
Perhaps I'm Janai at heart. So Soren, having grown up, seeing a male be forced to pretend to be non-binary, understood the stakes, faked it, wanted to stop faking it when she fell in love with Riker, and all kinds of bad things happened. Riker tried to take the blame when he bust into the hearing or the trial or the
trial. It was a trial.
It's a word when it's a psychiatric condition. I forget what it's called, but whatever. And Soren was super brave and said, "No, you did not influence me. I am female. Call me she. I do want to make love to this bearded human. Very brave. This is how I feel. It's not affecting you." So this is nice.
Soren gets a nice speech. It's a very good speech.
It's a very good speech.
Yeah. And they mentioned they were born that way. And
I was born that way.
That is where Lady Gaga got the title of the song.
For real?
That's what I'm going with.
Let's go with it. Yes. No, she didn't. But maybe she did. But she didn't. And that was a cute speech, and they cut to commercial, and then the head of the trial is like, "Yes, very nice. We're still going to psychotechnic you." And when Riker goes back later, like Faith was saying, Soren says, "No, I'm happy. I don't want to leave. I'm better now. It's okay. They fixed me. Thanks. Bye forever." And Riker's heart is broken. Does that happen a lot? Does Riker like fall in love every other episode?
It's not every other episode, but it's common enough that it's a trope on the show. I think it's maybe like once or twice a season, honestly. But there's plenty of episodes where like the crew go to the planet of bumpy heads and doomed this week, and one of the crew falls in love, and it depends on whose character gets that episode that week.
Understood.
Yeah,
this was a Riker episode.
And
they rescued the two people who were in the quasi black hole, so that's okay. So all in all, I feel like gay kids and trans kids in the 90s probably watched this over and over and over until they wore out the goddamn VHS tape. Like I get how this would be rewarding, and gratifying, and I'm seen. I'm finally seen. More so the gay kids and the trans kids, and certainly more. But I feel like the non-binary kids were like, there it is. Thank you. There it is. How do I go to that planet? So I'm glad this episode is out there.
But they were also very non-binary in like one way.
Go on.
And I feel like non-binary is not as restrictive as Janai's society, where it's just, here's the one way we present.
I mean, like, that's how a restrictive society will be, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who, upon learning about non-binary or finding out a friend of theirs is non-binary, it's difficult if that person appears to present visibly female, visibly male. It's hard to get the pronouns right when your friend looks like a girl, looks like a guy.
Or at least what we would traditionally
exactly
say. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well,
we've got friends of each. We've got binary friends who appear very androgynous and non-binary friends who do not appear androgynous. And, fuck all y'all. Figure it out. Get the pronouns right. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
It actually is hard. We still make mistakes now.
We do.
I can cut that out.
No, everyone can make mistakes, and it's important that you know their mistakes, and it's important that you vow to do better and call out other people when they make mistakes. That was something I noticed in this episode. So Riker can't learn the damn pronouns. So basically, Riker and Soren, like their first scene, Riker refers to someone on Janai as a he, and Soren's like, actually, we don't have he's.
Yeah.
And Riker's like, well, what do we use? And Soren's like, well, we have other pronouns, but they don't translate. I'm like, they don't fucking need to translate, Soren.
Yeah.
They can just be schlub and nub. And
of course, fine. Riker's like, what do I say? It? Because that's disrespectful here. And literally every person I've ever met who's introduced to the concept of non-binary in a real, hard and fast way, a family member, a friend, something like that, they come at me with that it bullshit. Come on.
But they don't go to singular they, which is so obvious.
They're so confused and uncomfortable.
Skip singular
they
they in this whole episode.
It? Never say it.
And I noticed that when Soren gets injured in an accident on this show, and the doctor, and then Riker comes into sickbay, and Dr. Crusher is like, your co-pilot is better. If they can't say she's better or Schnrub is better.
But Riker says she the whole time.
Yeah. Once Soren comes out, I think. But not before then. But it was just, it's weird that they didn't quite grasp singular they in 1992. And again, I think some stupid English teachers would be like, can't use singular they. By the way, link down below to whole episodes. We'll link to Merriam-Webster. We'll link to Tom Scott. I think we've linked to them before. But, singular they has been used since, the 1400s.
Don't insult me. Don't pretend it hasn't been. It has. This person cut me off. They were a real asshole today. It's you use it all the time, and you don't even know. It's fine.
So, Riker's like, well, I'll try to figure it out, but, forgive me if I... Or, no, he doesn't say, forgive me if I make mistakes. He's like, you're gonna have to forgive me if I make mistakes.
Right.
He says it in a very much, you're the one asking something of me here.
You'll have to do the emotional labor moving forward, which I have said myself to my shame, and it's such a binary asshole thing to say.
Yeah.
Binary asshole here checking in.
And
what else did you think?
I noticed that throughout the whole episode they mix up sex and gender.
Go on.
Because sometimes they talk about them having no gender, other times they talk about them having no separate sexes.
Those are different things.
And those are different things. And again, 92, we weren't quite figuring this
out
yet.
Yeah, it was 20 years off at best.
And so again, that is probably a mistake a lot of people still make. And but it's wrong.
That's wrong.
Sex and gender are different things.
Let's go masturbate over a basket.
So when Soren is in sickbay, she's looking at Dr. Crusher and she's like, what's it like being a chick? And that's her exact no,
literally, that's from the script.
No, but she's like, you paint your faces, and
you have color on your face, and color on your nails.
Hair is more elaborate, and things like that. And I'm like, it's the 24th century because we're in the makeup has been worn by men throughout history.
But it isn't right now.
It isn't.
Except when it is.
Right now. And in 92, I think it still was.
Well, like...
Poison and hair metal bands.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, but guys have been wearing makeup for ages.
Okay.
Since like ancient Egypt and stuff. It wasn't the norm. I'm saying it wasn't the norm, but like still the idea that in the 24th century that no man on the Enterprise feels like wearing makeup. They actually did a thing on Star Trek The Next Generation. TNG, where there was a dress uniform. Not a dress uniform, but like a skirt and bodice version of the uniform.
Go on.
And there are a few episodes where it didn't really end up being used a lot, but there are a few episodes where women wear them and where men wear them. And so that was like one idea they had that... So in a few
episodes... Was it a thing in the episode?
No.
Or did everyone ignore that the men were in skirts?
It was just in a background. It was just like a guy in the background walks by wearing the skirts. And again, you never see any of the main cast in them. You don't see any of the main female cast. I think you actually see Troy in them in later seasons. And I think like Ensign Rowe might wear one like once or twice. But it wasn't common, but they were trying to do this thing of like, there can be dresses and men can wear dresses. And so the idea that like, it's the 24th century. There's no non-binary people on the starship. There's no
gay people
There's
on
no
the starship.
gay the first gay person in a main Star Trek cast wasn't until Star Trek Beyond.
Which year?
That was like...
4 weeks ago.
No, that was like 2 years ago or something. And I'm gonna feel old as soon as I look this up.
Fair enough.
But that was the first time that they had like a main cast person be gay.
Who just casually said, "Well, my husband thinks."
Sulu,
blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, Sulu in the Kelvin universe, 2016. So in the Star Trek movies, the reboots.
Which were like Baby Spock, Baby Sulu,
so
Baby
that's
Kirk.
called the Kelvin timeline, and it's like a separate timeline. So they made Sulu gay in the third one, probably the final one, and that was because George Takei had come out, and so that was the first like gay cast member. And they Star Trek's dabbled in gay stuff.
The gay character.
Gay character,
okay,
like a gay in the main cast, like like there was an episode of TNG, a few episodes earlier to this, where Dr. Crusher, female Dr. Crusher, falls for a species called the Trill, and where basically they're like a little worm thing that lives inside another body, and so she falls for the worm thing, and then the worm thing's person dies, and so it gets put in a female body,
and she still loves the worm thing,
and she's like can't handle the female body.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so they did an episode later on Deep Space Nine where it's like one of the Trill people, it's like there is a woman and their ex is also another Trill that's in a woman, and so they share a brief, I think, closed mouth kiss. So
there's this remove.
Yeah, as far as I know,
conversations they're theoretically starting. Yeah, there's always this remove. So if someone's like, "Wow, let's talk about those two women in a relationship," someone else could be like, hello, just because the host happens to be a female body." That's not what we're talking about this episode. That's not what it's about. So they played it safe.
Yeah, and as far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I know of only one trans episode of Star Trek, and it's a fucking embarrassment, and it was Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
We have to watch it.
Where the character of Quark, the Ferengi, gets like a sex change for some reason, but it's like part of a bet or a deal, or to like make a deal or something, or
maybe we don't want to watch.
No, and I think like all the actors involved criticized it because the entire thing was played as a jokey laugh, like, and I think like everyone involved hated the episode and criticized it, and so we're gonna not deal with that one. But I think the idea that there's no non-binary people in the 24th century, again, it shows the fact that this was like 1992.
Did the writers and producers have good intentions?
I think definitely.
Were they just trying to be different and push boundaries?
I think Star Trek as a franchise has had this idea of being progressive and dealing with progressive topics. And I think they very much tried to do that. Like they did an AIDS episode, and they've done a lot of racial stuff, and they're trying to be very progressive. Gene Roddenberry was very progressive.
Who is that?
He was the creator of Star Trek.
Got it.
And he died like literally a month before this episode aired. And he very much had this idea that it was going to represent a future where racism was a thing of the past, or where bigotry was a thing of the past.
Picard was bald.
And it didn't matter that Picard was bald, the famous saying of, haven't they cured baldness by the 24th century? And his comment was, they wouldn't have to.
It won't matter.
Yeah.
Whatever.
And so that was the idea. And so I think Star Trek very much tried to be very progressive, tried to present this idea of very accepting of difference and
I mean, in theory, at least, that's how cultures go.
Yeah.
Right? Little by little, slowly, excruciatingly slowly, you get more accepting, more broad-minded, more diverse.
But as we can
steps
see...
forward, steps back, steps forward, steps back.
In this episode from 1992, which is definitely trying to be progressive about ideas of gender and sex, what stands out is that it's sort of ignorant of non-binary people. It's ignorant of a lot of the ways that we can be different, about how gender is really a social construct, it really represents these ideas from a progressive 1992 mindset. Sure. And that does feel very dated right now to look back on it 30 years later.
Did you enjoy this episode?
I liked her speech. I liked Soren's speech very much. What I remember from this episode was Horn Dog Riker. And I don't like the unhappy ending, and it's Riker's by far one of my least favorite characters on the show.
That's interesting. Yeah. Okay. Just because he's a prototypical cis hetero.
Yeah.
Who's like sometimes predatory. I don't know
if he's predatory. There was one part where he like kind of grabs her by the shoulders and was like, "Come on," and it was like, but wait, I don't think she's come out yet, dude. You wouldn't do that to Geordi.
Also, I didn't love that she said, "What's the difference between males and females?" And he went, "Snips and snails and puppy dog tails." And I'm like, dude, this isn't a fucking joke. This person does not know what you're talking about. Don't open with a nursery rhyme.
Also, you deal with new alien species every day. This is a legitimate scientific question. Maybe answer it. There's chromosomal differences. There are hormonal differences.
Genitals. Breeding. Mating. They talk about mating.
He gets to that eventually, sort of. But it's like...
But he opens with this antiquated cultural relic?
Yeah, it's bizarre.
Why would you do that?
Why bizarre.
Would you start the conversation that way?
Yeah, because again, that struck me when we were watching the episode. I'm like, dude, this is a legit scientific question.
Yeah, and it would be cool to hear your real answer.
Like if I met a bunch of aliens that just had a bunch of tentacles and like 7 heads, I'd be like,
Talk to me about the heads and the tentacles.
Yeah, what's going on?
They would say, I don't know, I've had this my whole life. Yeah. Everyone I've ever known has had this. What's it like to have one head and no tentacles, weirdo? Yeah. And you'd be like, I don't know. And then you would grope to find some sort of language to make it clear to each other.
It's just odd that when you're literally on a mission of discovery and your goal is to seek out new life and new civilizations, and you're literally going... snips and snails and puppy dog tails, instead of just being like, oh look, someone asked me a legitimate biological question about the species that I am, when my job is going out and meeting new species and being diplomatic in my relations with them. maybe I should share this scientific information instead of being a dork.
I mean, and that's
why I don't like Riker.
In Riker's defense,
you
might be a little uncomfortable.
Maybe.
If a tentacle, what is it, 8-headed person?
7-headed.
7-headed
not
person.
8-headed.
It's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
Don't get me started. 7-headed person with tentacles talks to you and asks you what it's like to not have tentacles. Mm-hmm. Like, you might be uncomfortable because you don't know the stakes. You don't know if there's, like, sexual stuff or taboo stuff around that. And you might be inclined to recite that famous nursery rhyme about not having tentacles, which goes a little like this.
Tentacles? Tentacles.
I don't have tentacles. 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 But I have spectacles. Yeah. And they'd be like, what the fuck? And you'd be like, maybe I just made that up. I don't know. I'm uncomfortable right now. Uh-huh. Would you like to go into the second verse of the tentacles nursery rhyme that we know so well? On this planet?
I don't know that I'm going to have a choice.
Species knows the word tentacles. Tentacles.
I don't have tentacles, but one of the suits of a tarot deck is pentacles.
Pentacles.
Yeah.
So, like, obviously, everyone listening now and you and I know that, like, backwards and forwards, say it in our sleep.
Oh, yeah. My mom used to joke with me with that when I was, like, 3.
Yeah. And then that third verse goes into how I don't have 8 heads.
Yeah.
I don't have 8 heads.
I don't have 8 heads.
You all know how that ends. So
they have 7 heads, by the way. We've discussed that. You'd be the worst Enterprise person.
Maybe I'd be mopping the rugs and polishing the polyester seat cushions and
I'm the uniform vacuumer.
Vacuuming the holodeck.
I'm the velour care specialist.
I'm here for the floor cleaning. I did notice that the Janai had velour while the Enterprise had baseline polyester.
They had like lycra spandex.
There's definitely a stretch to it. I enjoyed my first TNG episode.
Yay. Okay, good.
I mean, I've always found the show a little boring.
I could see that.
Yeah. Yeah. If you have another gay or queer-ish or anything, even like a feminism one, let me know. I'll watch it. It's kind of interesting.
I feel like every so often, when there's a new Star Trek show, they're always like, we sexed it up and violenced it up a little bit.
That means we as a species are going backwards.
It's Star Trek. It's supposed to be kind of dull and cerebral and philosophical. That's sort of its jam. We have Fast and Furious for that.
Now I wonder, like, who am I and where do I fit in with Star Trek versus Star Wars versus Battlestar versus Fast and Furious? You don't have to like any of them. Versus, I don't know what else there is out there. I read books. I read library books.
You read a lot of library books.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't wait till the library's open and we can just walk around.
I know, right?
I just have to do reserves now. Hey, listeners, send me your book recommendations, fiction, non, and otherwise. I am desperate.
I guess probably Tech War.
Send me Tech War.
It was written by William Shatner. No, it was William Shatner's book series.
We'll be avoiding that as hard as I can.
Okay. All right.
Well, thanks, Faith.
You just offended all our Tech War loving listeners.
I am okay with that sacrifice.
Okay. Well,
tweet at me. Bring it. Thanks for this cool TV show.
Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that. And if you have any other gay or trans episodes of your favorite shows that you would like us to take a look at, we'd love to.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening.
All right. Bye.
We'll talk to you next time. Bye. If you've enjoyed this episode and want to help us keep making great content, go to patreon.com/genderrebels.
Please leave a 5-star review on iTunes.
And send your questions to questions@genderrebels.com.
Music for the Gender Rebels is by Jasper the Colossal. Link down below or download them on iTunes.
For all our episodes, visit genderrebels.com.
Gender Rebels is a Comeback Sync production. All rights reserved.
And to all you gender rebels out there,
keep rebelling!